Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jared, and this is Keen Reads. And today I will be doing a quick video just going over a review or a wrap up of what I've been reading over the last couple months or so. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is I've kind of been reading two books at a time lately. I've been reading a Shakespeare work and a poetry work. I'm going to focus a little bit more on the poetry today just because I feel like I've kind of harped a lot on Shakespeare recently. So I read the complete works of Carl Sandburg, and this is in a really nice Harcourt Brace and Company hardcover I got for $3. I bought another one of T.S. Eliot of the same, essentially the same edition, but for T.S. Eliot's complete poems. So I'm going to be going into those pretty soon. Actually, probably in the next month or so. I enjoyed Carl Sandburg's poems. He's very much his poems are kind of Americana. Kind of reminds me of if you ask me what a stereotypical poem would be from an American between 1900 to like 1950, it would be one of anything from here, especially when it comes to like his Midwest roots. His early poems are talking about Chicago. In fact, his first collection was called the Chicago Poems. I don't know if I'm going to read you any of them because I'm planning a video where I'm going to just read poems in the future. Let me see if there's a short one that I could just read to you guys. Here's one just called Lost Answers. I did not plan this. It's just one that I saw that I had marked with a sticky note. As you can see, there were a lot that I marked with sticky notes because I really did enjoy this volume. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. So just to give you a taste, this is Last Answers. So, I wrote a poem on the mist, and a woman asked me what I meant by it. I had thought till then only of the beauty of the mist, how pearl and gray of it mix and reel, and change the drab shanties with lighted lamps at evening into points of mystery quivering with color. I answered, the whole world was mist once long ago, and someday it will all go back to mist. Our skulls and lungs are more water than bone and tissue, and all poets love dust and mist because all the last answers go running back to dust and mist. So, complete poems of Carl Sandburg. Next, I read the collected poems of Dylan Thomas. Dylan Thomas was a Welsh poet. Yeah, Welsh, I believe. Lived in the mid-20th century, died in like the 1950s, I believe. Famously getting drunk and having a seizure on a dance floor. Most famous for his poem, Do Not Go Gently Into That Good Night. So obviously I marked that one. But actually, I highlighted a stanza in the middle of the poem that I had never heard before, which is what I'm going to read to you. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. I think that was my favorite stanza from the poem. But his poems were really good. I really enjoyed this collection. It feels like he picks a topic for each poem and then talks around that object without really discussing it directly, if that makes sense. That's probably the best way I have of describing the way that he writes. I also just really like some of his first lines. This is a good poem. The first line goes, the force that through the green fuse drives the flower. And then this line has been just stuck in my head for a week now. I keep coming back to it. And it's the first line of a poem that goes by the first line. And it's, I fellowed sleep who kissed me in the brain. I don't know why, but I fellowed sleep who kissed me in the brain has really been stuck in my brain lately. So that's collected poems of Dylan Thomas. Today I read this in one sitting, and that is Hesiod's Theogony and Works and Days. Hesiod was a poet writing around the same time as Homer. I believe these are the two works of his that we have that are complete. Obviously, he probably wrote more, but these are the ones that we have that are complete by him. And he's interesting in that he's the poet. He's I think he's the earliest poet who had essentially a personality, or that writes like kind of about himself in the work of basically saying, I am someone who is writing this down for you. Let me see if I can find how they say it, but I don't know. But basically that's it. What I just told you. So this is 2 works. They're each about 30 pages, so it was only a 60-page book. I read it just while I was had football on in the background. Theogony is the earliest source of some of the Greek myths that we have, the Olympian myths. Talks about Prometheus stealing fire in a fennel, and the other myths dealing around the origins of the Olympian gods, the Olympian pantheon. Works in Days goes through the 5 ages of man, and then ends with almost kinds of lists of do's and do nots about living in a society with other people. Kind of reminded me of some of the writing in the beginning of the Old Testament. The thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do that. Things like that. Overall, pretty dry, but it was kind of cool to see the earliest, some of the earliest source for some of the myths that we have that have been retold in other by other poets. As far as Shakespeare, since my Julius Caesar video, I've started to dig into the histories. So I read King Henry IV, Part 1 and Part 2. They were okay. Part 1 was better than Part 2. Generally not a huge fan of the histories, although I find them just interesting enough to keep me going. I don't think I'll ever come back to them, but it's not like when I'm reading them, I'm wishing for them to be over. So obviously, if I read King Henry IV, Parts 1 and 2, next up, so going into what I plan to read in the next week or so, is King Henry V. And then I have obviously King Henry VI, Parts 1, 2, and 3 coming up, followed by Richard III. And then, so that finishes, so the histories are kind of, there's 10 histories with 1 extra, kind of. There's the 2 tetralogies. So the first tetralogy is actually the second when we think about its place in history. So it's Henry VI, Parts 1 through 3, followed by Richard III. And then the second tetralogy that he wrote was Richard II, followed by Henry IV, Part 1, Part 2, and then Henry V. And then kind of capping each one, we have King John, capping them chronologically. We have King John, which takes place way before Richard II, and then we have Henry VIII, which takes place after Richard III. And then there's also Edward III, which was only partially written by Shakespeare, or controversially may have been written by Shakespeare. So those are kind of all the histories. So far I've read Edward III, Richard II, and then the 2 Henry IVs. So still got a lot to go. And I'm thinking of breaking that up with the sonnets. So I picked up his work, or collected sonnets as well. So I'll probably break up the histories with the sonnets. As far as my next poetry I plan on reading, it's going to be the collected poems of W.B. Yeats. I've read a selected poems of W.B. Yeats and liked it enough, obviously, to pick up a complete collection. So excited to read through this. Coming up in the future, I also have somewhat T.S. Eliot, like I said. But before I read my T.S. Eliot, I am going to read the biography of a poem, The Wasteland. So it's a whole book about the poem, The Wasteland, which I got for Christmas last year. I think I'm finally going to read that and then dig into T.S. Eliot's works. I think I might have some Neruda coming up. I think I'm just going to try to bust through a ton of poetry that I've kind of put on the back burner while I'm reading Shakespeare. Maybe dig into the Romantics. I've been looking to pick up a volume of William Blake. I have selected works of Shelley and Keats. So maybe pick up Coleridge, Byron. There's someone else, Wordsworth. Is that all 6 of the Romantic poets? Blake, Byron, Shelley, Keats, Coleridge, Wordsworth. Yep. So, yeah, that's kind of what I've been reading and what I plan to read in the future. Just wanted to give you guys a short little video, little update. Thanks for watching.